My name's Stephen Weeks. I've been coaching 30 years. I'm Vice President Operations for Suncoast Sports Club on Siesta Key and Lakewood Ranch. Well, we started coaching in 1984, and the days were hot, but it's not like it is now. You have to pay more attention to the players and the coaches as well, and it gets more difficult to determine, who needs to come out of the game and who doesn't.
If you think about it in this way, when your body is overheating, it has a mechanism in place to help it to reduce its core temperature. It works that way by releasing sweat on the skin, which then evaporates and reduces your core temperature. So when temperatures are extremely high outside, that system doesn't work very well. When humidity levels are extremely high, that system doesn't work well. And when your body is not properly hydrated, you don't have the ability to release the sweat, which then reduces your core temperature. So we do see heat-related illnesses very often in this population of student athletes.
By pushing a player to stay in the game when he should come out, that's not good. Some kids can just play all day long in this heat, others cannot.
I think of heat-related illness in really three steps or three levels of severity. Heat cramping being the mildest form of heat-related illness. If this isn't properly addressed, you move on to heat exhaustion. In this scenario, you have cramping, but you also have problems with dizziness, some mental status changes, and some drop in blood pressure and elevation in heart rate. This stage, if not properly addressed, will then progress on to heat stroke, which is a life-threatening scenario, and it is a medical emergency. In this scenario, you can see loss of consciousness and seizure activity. Yeah, I actually have a personal story. One of my daughters runs cross country, and I was at a cross country meet, and the temperature outside was about 80 degrees. Humidity was probably about 85%. And within 15 minutes, they brought a 17-year-old boy on a golf cart off the track as he had passed out, and was completely unconscious. And this child was suffering from a heat stroke. And we called 911. It took 35 minutes for an ambulance to reach us. We were in a scenario where we were not adequately prepared for that. So it is a big problem. The more days of increased and extreme heat days that we see, the more of a problem this becomes. People in the medical field in general have really recognized climate change as a public health issue. It's very important that we as parents and as educators and coaches and the support system for these kids, that we recognize what heat-related illness is and how severe it really can be. So if you've identified somebody suffering with a heat-related illness, it's important to pull them from the activity, make sure they get hydrated, and place them in a cooling station. It's also very important to have medical professionals available on site on the field.
Well, what we tell the coaches is this: if the kid runs by and he has a red face, sub him. In Little League, we sub him at our group. Flag football is the same way. We have a coaches meeting that tells them the signs to look for heat exhaustion.
Some of the solutions we can implement are early warning systems to make sure everyone in the community knows that high heat days are coming. We need to allow children and these teen athletes or these youth athletes the time to acclimate to high temperature training. So perhaps starting a few days a week, later in the day, expanding the amount of hours that you spend outside in that heat. It's also important that kids are wearing the right gear when they're out there. They need to be wearing light colored, loose fitting clothing.
And hydration is very important because the heat will get to you. What's happened in the last few years, that when you have a soccer match, every 15 minutes, but the referee will call a timeout for a water break. Over the last few years, more and more parents have become more involved in sports and in things like hydrating the player before he gets to the game and during the game, and they watch out for those type of signs. If it's getting hotter, I just suggest move to evening games. Come to a field like this that has lights and play at night. I'd say we're gonna have more hot days in the future, and you need to prepare for it.
It's a responsibility of all of ours, of the entire community, to prevent these heat-related illnesses. They can be prevented.